Hey folks, it's
No,
a snowy and rainy day in New York, so I'm happy to see some other faces. Really, Pete, I can only see your face, but I think that's enough for today. Very excited to be talking about data-driven one-on-ones with our very own Pete Kazanjy.
hello.
Hello. Today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, MSP, as we like to call it, is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and rev ops, all the other supporting disciplines. And our mission is to create an environment for our 20,000 and constantly growing members to answer questions they struggle to answer on their own and help them see around corners they might not even know are there. We do that through some awesome live sessions like the one today with our wonderful Pete, and hopefully in the future in-person events, and of course, a robust online forum where people are just in there every day talking about the best of the best. For those
Chopping it up.
chopping it up, for those of you who are not in our community, we're going to invite you afterwards, and we hope that you join. We hope that you come in on that online forum and show our folks some things, and we hope to see you on our events as well. I want to go into some quick housekeeping notes for you. Of course, this event is being recorded. We would never let all of this amazing content just float into the ether. It will be available shortly after. You can share it with colleagues, you can share it with your cousin, you can share it with your dogs if they're into that. Whoever you want to share it
Mm.
with, that recording is going to be available for you because who doesn't love data-driven one-on-ones? And then
Dogs love data-driven
I
one-on-ones.
think so.
Definitely.
I think so. I would see
Yeah.
specific breeds,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
but the second thing is we love for these to be really interactive. So please do use the Q&A feature, use the chat feature. I always like to shout out anybody who's used the chat feature so far. It's only Hannah so far, so go show Hannah and the rest of us some love and ask Pete all of your favorite data-driven questions. That's all the housekeeping notes I have on my end. This event is sponsored and brought to you by our parent company at Atrium. And Pete, I'm going to go backstage and let you take it away to talk about Atrium and, of course, to talk about yourself. The show is now yours.
Okay, awesome. Cool. I think I'm gonna share my screen here. Thank you, Taylor. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
the introduction. Let me make sure I click the right button and not
Okay.
the not the wrong button here. Hold on one second.
All right.
Screen share. Cool. Screen could not share unexpectedly. Well, that's delightful. But hey, everyone, I'm Pete Kazan.
Oh, Pete, where did you go? We've lost Pete. Give us, oh, wait, Pete, you're
No,
back.
I am. Here, let's see. Screen share had an issue. Refresh and retry. All right, here. Can you just flip the slides into the media?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess we're doing it here instead. uh, you're not gonna be able to see me like mousing around and stuff. So yeah, I'm Pete Kazanjy. I'm the founder of Atrium. We make data-driven sales management software that purely exists to help managers, so AE managers, SDR managers, AMCSM managers use data to improve team performance. That's like what we exist to do. I'm the founder of Atrium, also lead our sales organization. Also, I'm the founder of Modern Sales Pros. Also wrote the book Founding Sales on startup sales. So as you can kind of tell, I think a little bit about about sales topics. Today we're going to be talking about data-driven one-on-ones, which will be really fun. It's a topic that I is near and dear to my heart. Just before we get started there, just want to kind of share some resources that I've been stoked on recently, some sales management resources I've been stoked on. These are a couple different books. Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon. It's really fantastic on sales management in general. Cracking the Sales Management Code, that's kind of more specifically focused on data-driven sales management. And then one book I'm particularly juiced on is the 5 Secrets of a Sales Coach by Corey Bray and Hillman Sori. So if folks would like a copy of those books and a Coffees for Closers Yeti, we're going to drop a link in the chat here, and you guys can sign up for that. We'll get that out to you. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about data-driven one-on-one. So we're going to talk about one-on-ones, how they're kind of like typically done, and like how they're typically like maybe poorly done, and how they could potentially be done better. And I think one of the kind of the big things that that people don't appreciate as much as they should is that line management, so AE management, SDR management, AMCSM management. So that line manager is really where there's like an area for an area of leverage in organizations, and can really make the difference between a high performing team and like a less high performing team. And so the problem, of course, is that sales management ends up like not being the easiest thing in the world to do. There's actually a lot of things that you have to do. You have to be like, usually AE managers do a pretty good job of deal inspection and kind of deal strategy. So actually a bunch of other stuff you have to do. You have to do data-driven one-on-ones. You got to be tracking goals. You got to be identifying issues in your reps and fixing them, monitoring the ramp of new hires, etc. We're going to talk about one of those methods here today, which is the one-on-one, and it's an extraordinarily powerful tool for making your reps more performant. Couple of reasons as to why we have one-on-ones. Really, it's just like it's a cadence opportunity. It's a place on the calendar for us to engage in, successful management behavior. So whether that's building relationship and trust with our reps, which allows us to create a coaching and development environment, to provide feedback, to make people better, to address issues through that feedback, to address issues before they become big problems, and in general, just like to have a recurring back check to make our reps more successful there. And so if you want to think about like what would be good outcomes, right, like of a successful one-on-one, it could be a variety of things depending on how you compose your one-on-one agenda. But things like you're aware of the status of deals in the reps pipeline, where you can kind of help out there. This is actually one of the things that I like to do, is to kind of separate that out into its own, what I call a deal strategy meeting. It's like literally focused on that, because one of the bigger things that one of the higher leverage things that you can focus on is things that are going on with the rep where you can improve the rep themselves, which then will generate benefits across all of their pipeline, as opposed to focusing in on specific deals. And that's kind of like further down this list, where the reps are receiving targeted coaching, guidance, performance feedback, and like making agreements for accountability on progress there. And then specifically, the way that we do that, of course, is like we have an agenda where we go through these things on a recurring basis, and then moreover, we create action items that come out of that. Right? Like, hey, you're going to go do this, and this. We're going to come back together in a week. We're going to come back together in 2 weeks, and we're going to review if that happened and how it happened. And if it didn't, there's going to be an accountability conversation there. And so one of the ways that you can do this successfully is with a nicely structured one-on-one agenda. This is the agenda that we use right here. I wonder actually if Hannah can, or someone can drop the template into the chat. We actually have a template of this that we share with folks. But the idea here is that you have this, you have a document that you can come back to on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. That has space for the different topics. So like the topics that the rep wanted to cover, the topics that the manager wanted to cover, a current area of coaching emphasis, and then actions that come out of this. And so this is like what a typical one-on-one could look like here. Now, one of the things you can do to make those one-on-ones way more effective is bring data into them. And the reason why it's important to do this is because with data, you can actually get leverage on your management. And so you can be more effective in that management. and do so in a way that, like, you know, spend more time on things that actually matter, as opposed to kind of in the weeds, like, you know, for example, riding along with calls, or like listening to calls. And so here are a couple of reasons why managing, you know, using data to have more leverage is really important here. Like, as an example, riding along on calls, while traditionally kind of viewed as like the bellwether of management, um, is, if you're doing that across all of your team, you're actually like, it's extremely low leverage, because it's not going very quickly. Like, you're having you can't listen to the call at 1.5x when you're literally sitting there. You're not going to be able to do any coaching while you're on that call. And then moreover, you're essentially like, you're at the mercy of what that call might be, depending on, you know, which prospect shows up, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's kind of more like throwing darts, and it ends up being like, you know, it's better than doing nothing, but it ends up being fairly low leverage. Um, the other things that end up being very low leverage is like being the super manager who's like seeking to close deals for their reps. That's also extremely low leverage. What we want to do is we want to be spending our time making our reps better, so to raise their win rate on their own. If you have 8 reps that you're able to make 10% better, that's going to be way more impactful than you spending your time trying to close, you know, get these deals across the line at the bottom of the funnel. Similarly, deal by deal inspection only kind of shows you a snapshot of what's going on, right? It's kind of like it's like whack-a-mole, like, what's going on with this deal? What's going on with this deal? What's going on with this deal? Whereas using data in order to understand what might be a behavioral problem across a rep's entire sales motion, which will then impact every single deal, is a lot higher leverage, as opposed to turning over this card, like, what's going on with this deal? What's going on with this deal? What's going on with this deal? And so the idea here is that by using data, you can actually you can hone in on where the issues are, and then targetedly coach in situations like that. And so we'll kind of talk through how you can use metrics and data in your one-on-ones here a little bit. And so really one of the kind of metaphors I like to use here with this is this notion of it actually comes from fighter pilots. It's this notion of the OODA Loop. So the observe, orient, decide, and act. It was popularized by this guy named John Boyd. And really what it kind of comes down to is, like, it's about situational awareness, understanding what's going on so you can decide to take an action, taking that action, and then looping back again to see if the action had the relevant impact. And the original place where this showed up was in you know, air-to-air warfare doctrine. But it turns out that it's actually something that became very popular within entrepreneurship and startups, but also it's a management thing as well. And so the idea here is that what you do is you observe the situation, right? You observe the situation using information that's at your, you know, that's at your disposal. You then orient based on that. Like, oh, okay, based on this information, I think I understand. Like, you create a hypothesis. I think that this is what's happening here. You then make a decision to act to make that situation better, whether you're a fighter pilot trying to down another aircraft, or in our case, you're a manager who's trying to improve their reps' behavior, and then you take an action, right? Make a prescription. And then importantly, what happens is then you loop back again to the beginning at a later juncture, and it might be 60 seconds later, or it might be a week later, or it might be a month later, whatever. But the important thing is you loop back again, and then you say, hey, did the action that I took make the change that we wanted to do, right? And so this notion of this loop is something that applies to management as well, specifically as relates to using data to manage effectively. And so what you can kind of see here is on the left, you have a situation of like what this looks like without data. And I think a lot of managers can kind of empathize with this, where you're trying to observe what's going on with your reps and kind of like detect issues. And because you don't have data, you're kind of blind, right? And so you're like, oh man, I didn't see some issue here. And then secondarily, next, you might want to inspect. Okay, well, I'm going to ask some questions. Then when you say, okay, I need to make a decision here in order to act, I actually, unfortunately, I'm kind of blocked because I don't have enough information to do that with. I feel uninformed, and so the outcome of all of this is usually inaction. And so I think a lot of managers have felt this before where they have like a spidey sense of what's going on with like a rep or the team or what have you, like this rep over here, I feel like they're maybe doing XYZ. And so because they don't have the information that's available to them, they don't want to be the asshole. And so they end up kind of not acting. And so what ends up happening is like a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, et cetera, what comes out is like oftentimes it turns out they were right. And then you're kicking yourself because you're like, oh man, I had that spidey sense, but I didn't have the information by which to validate it. And I didn't take an action. And now look what's going on here. And so the preferred approach, of course, would be doing it with data, which you can kind of see on the right side of the screen there. And so the idea there is like instead, because we have good data in front of us, we have a good metrics harness, we can see something that's going on. Like when we observe, we can see that something's weird. Like, oh man, I see that something's weird that's going on here. Moreover, it's easy for us to like dig in a little bit. Like I'm going to dig into this. I'm going to take a next action here. Like, oh, that feels like there's maybe something going on here. I'm going to ask the next question. I'm going to ask the next question. And then importantly, because you're informed and you have lots of information, you feel that you are sufficiently informed in order to form that hypothesis and make a decision. And then because of that, you can act. You can act to fix it because ultimately that's what we want. What we are responsible for doing as managers is we're responsible for changing behavior, right? Changing rep behavior to make them more successful. And so that right there on the right side is the mechanism by which organization, like successful managers, do this for the to the benefit of their team. And so just a really kind of quick overview or really kind of quick commercial here for Atrium. This, what I just described, is literally what we spend our time doing. Is what our opinion is that managers, so AE managers, SDR managers, AMCSM managers, really deserve something that is purpose-made software that helps them be data-driven and use data to improve the performance of their teams. And so what that looks like in practice is like every KPI you could possibly want for your team already pre-baked out of the box. Important, but then not just every single KPI, but also all of those KPIs being monitored on a recurring basis for the manager. So tracking progress towards goals, early warning alerting, like, hey, there's issue over here with this rep. You might want to investigate this. And then also just doing automated analysis of those issues in order to indicate a potential root cause there. And so the idea here is that ultimately what you want to be able to do is help your managers get leverage, help your AE managers, help your SDR managers, help your sales operations function get leverage by using data in order to improve team performance and allow those managers to spend their time coaching and managing from that, as opposed to kind of like casting around trying to figure out what the issues are. We're blessed to work with a couple hundred different amazing customers. And one of the things that's kind of most compelling about Atrium is it takes about 90 seconds to set up a free account. You can just do it at atriumhq.com by connecting it to your Salesforce account. Cool. So that's a little bit on Atrium there. So the important thing is we were talking about that OODA loop and how we want to be able to like loop back and loop back and loop back, and in so doing we're improving our team and we're improving our reps over time. So the way that you do that is you actually have to systematize it. You can't just do it once. You have to do it on a recurring basis. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how we can, how specifically you can do that here. So the first thing is that we have that one-on-one cadence happening, but then importantly, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have those assets brought into that one-on-one. So we need to have those assets, those data-driven assets, tied to that one-on-one, such that we can be consumed, like A, force consumption of them, and then B, make sure that we're coming back to them on a recurring basis. So there's a couple different ways that you can do this. Probably the most prototypical way, little old school, is CRM reporting, I think we're all kind of familiar with, like, the mega wall of charts of a dashboard or what have you. The good news about this approach is that it's available now. Usually it's pretty flexible if you're good at Salesforce reporting, which if you have a handy dandy sales operations person who who is able to do that, that can be a good thing. Unfortunately, a lot of the time those people are running around like with their hair on fire with a bajillion other requirements for them. But that's kind of like one of the more prototypical ways of the legacy way of approaching that. An additional kind of like approach of doing that, of course, is like business intelligence software, maybe like a Tableau or Looker. Again, it's like this notion of like a wall of charts that you potentially can dig through if you have if you have the time or the ability to do so. Of course, the challenge with BI solutions is that they're extremely powerful, but even more complicated and even like less user friendly for those individuals to use. And so that's usually why that's the realm, those kind of stick in the realm of the analyst team, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, there's things like data-driven sales management software, of which Atrium is an example. And so the idea here is that it's purpose made for this specific use case. It's very quick to set up. The downside is it's a little less flexible. You can't necessarily ask any question that you want to be able to ask, whereas like with CRM reporting or BI, like you can build any report you want as long as the data is there and as long as you know how to do it. But the flip side of data-driven sales management software is also that it's automatically monitored, and that kind of comes along with that. Cool. So the mechanism by which we might systematize this is primarily in those one-on-ones, as we kind of described previously. But there's a couple of other ways that you might do that as well. One thing that I like to do is to kind of decompose the one-on-one to make sure that there's specific spots on the calendar for the content that needs to be covered. So an example of that might be, one of the things that I like to do is I actually split up what otherwise might be an hour-long by like every other week one-on-one into actually a half hour that I call a deal strategy meeting. And we actually have those on a weekly basis with each rep, and then a half hour one-on-one that is focused on coaching and that is focused on career development and feedback and what have you. And that's a bi-week. And each of these each of these meetings have different assets associated with them. A deal strategy meeting is focused on, like, it has an op view, right? Like that might be, here's a set of ops. This is of course for account executives. Here's a set of ops, and like maybe they might be sorted by the ones that are supposedly coming in the upcoming period, or it might be sorted by the size of the opportunity, or what have you. And then on the flip side, in the one-on-one, the assets that are being brought to bear there are things like a specific coaching dashboard, right? Where that might be a set of core metrics that you want to look at, like customer facing meeting volume, opportunity ownership, pipeline hygiene measures, et cetera, et cetera. And then also maybe some visualizations of things that are like specific areas of coaching emphasis for that rep. And that's going to be bespoke on a rep by rep basis, but that's important because what we have is we have a coaching intention for that rep. Like, this rep, we're working on keeping your pipeline hygiene cleaner, right? And we're going to measure that through looking at how many untouched opportunities that you have right now. Or in this case right here, this rep, we're working with them on their opportunity conversion. We're working on them with them on down funnel acumen. And so then the measure we might have associated with that might be like opportunity conversion rate out of a down funnel stage. B, it might be things like multi-threading into these organizations as measured by contacts per account engaged there. Or it might be something like the time and stage, like we're working with you to kind of get things through your funnel. We would want to measure the time and stage of those down funnel ops. And so that would be a different coaching emphasis than the one in the prior reps example. And so what we're doing in these situations with these reps is we're looking to implement that OODA loop, right? Like we're detecting potential issues. We want to diagnose what the root cause is potentially together. Usually better to kind of show up with a hypothesis and then like talk with the rep and get their point of view on that, and then co-create the potential resolution to that, and then lastly communicate the outputs of that. So discuss it, agree on the resolution, and then put a line in the sand as to what we're going to do about this, and the essentially the assignment that comes out of it, and and then what we expect to see when we come back together in a week, or what we expect to see when we come back together in a couple of weeks. So just to kind of show what a couple examples of this might look like, first from a detection, right, to like detecting an issue standpoint, first probably what we want to do is as a manager is we want to get good at reading the data. And this is where like a little bit of the kind of like stare and compare of your traditional wall of charts. This is where we have to get good at staring and comparing. But there's a couple of ways that you can do that. So first, what you want to do is you want to like look for outperformance, right? So on the left here, you can see that's a visualization of customer facing meeting volume on a rep by rep basis this month. And what you can see is like there's an individual who's outperforming there. There's another individual that's underperforming. And at least like what can be very helpful here is just looking at apples to apples in this regard and saying, hey, here's a set of reps who should probably have this a similar motion. And if you see substantial aberrations there, that's actually a potential indication that something's potentially worth investigating there. And so in the case of Cyril there, the outperformant rep who's having way more customer facing meetings than his peers, there might be actually an opportunity there to investigate and figure out what is the secret of his success, such that we can spread that around to the rest of the folks. Of course, we won't know that he's engaged in this outperformance unless we're actually detecting this. And then on the flip side there, I forget the name of that person. Oh yeah, Nutty, good old Nutty the Vulture. If we see that this person has, is underperforming us again as compared to their peers, that allows us to get ahead of that and investigate and like put that on an agenda topic in order to understand, okay, hey, what's going on here? Have you perceived this as well? What do you think the root cause of this is, et cetera? So that's one approach, is kind of like comparing individuals, peer to peer, to kind of get a sense of like where there might be issues or there's outperformance. The other thing to look at is actually trends, right? And so this is why when you're constructing dashboards, what can be really effective is to put a total with a trend, so you can kind of see them side by side. So to use an example here, Nutty the Vulture, really quickly, what we would potentially want to understand is, has Nutty the Vulture been low like this for quite some time? Because if so, like, yikes, right? That kind of seems like a little bit of a problem there. And so on the right there, what you can see is a trended visualization there. And so what we can kind of quickly see here is a couple of things going on. At the bottom there, we can see a couple of folks who have like been fairly consistent in their low meeting volumes. And so that's something that's like an area of concern there. Moreover, what we can see is in the case of the orange, what's his name, Brer Rabbit, we can actually see someone who had been higher previously and now has trailed down over time. Right? And so that's concerning for a different reason. The good news is we know that that person historically was actually much higher. So we know that we have an existence proof that they're able to perform at those levels, but something seems to have changed. And so because something has changed, we probably want to be able to investigate that. And then similarly, we can see an example of somebody who's highly performing across the board. And that person's name is Queen of Hearts. Right. And so what you can see, and so by being able to like look at these trends quickly, what you can do is you can kind of pick out a couple of these things. So what would come out of me seeing this would be like, okay, Queen of Hearts seems like she's outperforming on a fairly consistent basis. That's fantastic. One, I would love to give her a high five. Two, I would love to figure out what is driving this recurrent outperformance so I can systematize it for the rest of the team. That's a coaching action that comes out of this visualization right here. 2, Brer Rabbit seems to have fallen off over time. That is something that seems like an area of concern for me. So I would want to have an intention to talk with this rep in my one-on-one with him or her in order to say, hey, I'm noticing this right here. Are you observing this as well? What's going on here? And then with respect to the folks, I think, the folks who are more consistent at the bottom of the stack here, and importantly, consistently, that indicates to me, one, maybe I probably should have gotten ahead of this a couple one-on-ones ago, and then, or maybe I actually did, and this has been an area of conversation. And so, given the fact that this is a recurring topic, I need to escalate this to the next level of potential investigation. And so this is how, like, what I just took us through is like how to get good at reading data and the mechanisms by which you can do that in a visualization scenario. Now, of course, the downside of this is that you actually do have to do this visualization. The nice thing about like purpose-made software that can do this for you is that it can actually automate a lot of this. It can actually automate a lot of this statistical detection. Automate a lot of this detection statistically as opposed to requiring you to do it visually. And so what you can kind of see here is some examples of some of that statistical detection where a given individual is substantially lower than their peers with respect to new opportunity inflow, and there's actually an alert on that. Like, we didn't have to use our eyes in order to say, oh, okay, that person looks like they're lower. There actually was a statistical anomaly that was instrumented here, and it came to me and said, oh, hey, here's here's where this person is light. Or similarly, what you can see is a change over time to the improvement, right, of an individual who has more new opportunity inflow than they have had historically. So taking advantage of alert, like statistical detection and like anomaly detection in more modern approaches can be a very powerful thing because it can do some of that staring and comparing for you. And so instead of you having to like read the tea leaves in the dashboards and what have you, instead it's literally right there, like, okay, cool, I guess I have a topic for Angel here in our one-on-one to talk about this lack of new opportunity inflow there. If you want to get super geeky on this, one of the things you can do is, in addition to detecting the issue in question, right, what you can then seek to do is see if you can get to the root cause of it. And the mechanism by which you would do that is by going upstream to the root causes of these various, like, the potential issues associated with a metric, by kind of like thinking about what are the upstream metrical drivers of that. So as an example, with AEs in the revenue formula here, a bookings issue is potentially going to come from a variety of things that are upstream. One, it might be wins, it might be the average selling price, it might be the average deal cycle. And so if you go up a level and say, oh, you know what, actually the reason why this person's bookings are low is because their wins are off, you can then say, oh, well, where is that coming from? Is that coming from the fact that a person has a lower win rate, or they have fewer attempts, right? And what you can, by kind of going upstream and figuring out where the kind of like pulling on that thread, you can then figure out, okay, this is the area where I need to double click and coach appropriately. And the thing is, you can do the same thing with SDRs as well. Again, the mechanism by which to do this is, generally speaking, the most effective mechanism by which to systematize this is going to be in the one-on-one, right? Cool. And so one of the things that when you have this information that you're detecting, or like these issues that you're detecting, one of the great ways that you can use this to develop your reps is in that one-on-one. And so the mechanism by which you're going to do that is like taking that information and then coaching to it, right? Acting on it. And so I want to kind of give you some examples, of like what coaching looks like versus what coaching doesn't look like, and then also give you some examples, kind of some examples of what this has looked like live actually in our organization. And so kind of one of the mechanisms by which to kind of demonstrate this is like some examples here of like what not coaching looks like, and then what the coaching equivalent of that might be. So for instance, rather than focusing in on saying like, hey, when's this deal coming in, right, which is, that might drive a rep to just, blow smoke at you. It might be a question like, what's concerning you about this Lockheed deal, right? Or when talking about forecasting, instead of saying, hey, can you make this forecast bigger? Well, that's actually not a very helpful, like, that's not a very helpful question, because what are you asking the rep to do? To like inflate the deal sizes that are not like that are not reality? Do you want them to improve a forecast category on something that's actually not at the relevant state? No, the more effective thing would be to say, hey, I'm observing this problem. It appears that your forecast is pacing behind. Do we have ideas on what we potentially can pull forward? Right? Like, is there a swing deal where like maybe we could do something by splitting the deal size or providing some sort of pricing inducement? We can move that forward in time. Is that something we can do? Versus, or alternatively, maybe there's nothing we can do about it. But instead, what we can do is we can say, hey, what actually caused this situation such that we can avoid this in the future? If you're talking to an SDR, or also like account executives as well, instead of saying, hey, I need you to do more activity, the approach might be more along the lines of like, hey, I've observed that your meeting volumes are maybe a little bit lighter than usual. What do we think is potentially contributing to that, such that we can co-create an answer? And so by using data and saying like, hey, here's this situation, I noticed that your meeting volumes are light. What do you think might be contributing to that? And then moreover, what do you think we can do together to fix it? Or alternatively, hey, you need to clean up your pipe. Actually, I've seen that there are a large number of opportunities in your pipe that are untouched right now. I've seen on our pipeline hygiene dashboard that your number of untouched opportunities has been ramping up over time. What do you think we can do about that? Right? And so the thing there is like, and then what we can do is we can prescribe an answer to that, and then change actual behavior there. One of my favorite approaches for this is the coaching methodology from 5 Secrets of the Sales Coach. Again, this is a book that I really enjoy by Hillman Sori and Corey Bray. And again, if you'd like a copy, we're going to drop a link in the chat here. You're more than welcome to sign up for it. So the last thing I want to touch on here is just kind of an example of like, coaching in practice here, of what like data-driven sales coaching might look um, like actually looks like live. And so the example here would be a rep that we have, who is now a top performing rep, who had an issue progressing ops down the funnel. Okay. And so in this case, what you can see is that a rep, and this, unfortunately, I don't have an annotator here, but you can see the graphic here of these at the bottom are the stages of the opportunity progression, and then on the side there is the percentage of opportunities that actually progressed through those stages. And really quickly, what you could see is that this rep had a little bit of an issue at the beginning of the funnel, where his opportunity conversion rate out of meeting pending is lighter than his peers. And then moreover, you can see he has a really serious issue where his conversion rate out of proposal and his conversion rate out of contract is substantially lower than other folks. So like, this is the issue. We observed the issue. It wasn't just a question of like, oh, hey, you've got a bookings problem. No, we specifically see where the issue is. And then as a result, we can potentially do something about it. Right? Because like what we've done here is we've honed in on where the issue is. It's not a mid-funnel issue. It's a bottom of funnel issue. here. And so then what we did was we sought to improve that. So this is actually a little bit of a different visualization. This is the conversion rate from discovery for these specific reps. And so what you can see here is that it was light, and then through coaching, we're able to get that higher by focusing in on stronger discovery conversations. So we remediated that, right? We changed the reps' behavior and got them better at discovery in order to ramp that up. And so as a result, what happened was the number of opportunities that individual rep was getting into a pilot state just took off, because previously he had a leaky bucket at the top of his pipe, and then also at the bottom of his pipe. And so as a result, what you see is his number of opportunities that are reaching a pilot stage just absolutely takes off, because he's converting more of those out of meeting pending into this further state. Okay. Similarly, what you can see here is that this is a win rate. This is measuring the win rate from a specific stage, is the win rate from that proposal stage. And as we saw earlier on, the rep had an issue, again on the right side there, of conversion rate out of proposal and then conversion rate out of contract out, which of course would impact the win rate out of proposal. And so by focusing in on closing and making sure that the rep had strong control of those deals and things weren't going sideways, you can see that the win rate from proposal substantially changed over time. So in February, it was in the doghouse. In March, it was in the doghouse. In April, it was okay. And then what changed was that in May and June, that win rate from proposal took off as a result of that concerted coaching. And so what came out of this as a result was, this is the same visualization that we had previously up here, but instead of having these issues of a lower conversion rate out of meeting pending and out of security review and out of proposal and out of contract, now all of a sudden that rep in the orange here, all of those conversion rates are much higher, right? And so this is the outcome of data-driven sales management, is we were able to specifically diagnose an issue with the rep. In this case, it was conversions in a specific area of their sales motion, engage in targeted coaching to improve their behavior. And then what you can see here is, like, when we loop back, again, the OODA loop, when we loop back to observe again and say, hey, did that actually work? Did that work? Did we do a good job? Or did that actually not work? You can see it actually worked, right? Like, we changed the reps' behavior, and then then what came out of that was higher performance. And then moreover, one of the things you can see here is that this is the same rep, and this is their pipeline moving down funnel. And so what had happened previously was, like, their pipeline was bumping along right here, and then as a result of them engaging, of like having higher conversion rates at the top of the funnel and in mid funnel, the amount of their pipeline, like they stymied their leaky bucket, and so their pipeline ownership took off in a very meaningful way. And so in summary, I hope what you can kind of see here is that the tangible benefits of data-driven coaching, data-driven sales coaching in a one-on-one, like using the one-on-one as the biggest kind of example there, the cadence example, it just is like, the benefits of it just astronomical. And so when you think about the outcomes that are coming out of this here, like, again, the things that we want to be focused on is, like, making sure that our reps are getting targeted coaching, getting guidance and performance feedback. But then importantly, what's happening is, like, we give that guided feedback, we give that guided coaching. We're then setting expectations, then looping things back around again, and then progress is actually happening on a week by week basis, right? Some of the examples here that where of, like, kind of pro tips would be, again, have that shared Google Doc to make sure that it acts as a living agenda, so we have a record of what we discussed, and moreover, we're drawing a line in the sand there. We have a specific written, like, purpose statement on the one-on-one, and then include the links in the calendar invite to your one-on-one, and then any relevant reports and dashboards, and then also make sure that those links are present in the agenda, excuse me, in the agenda document as well. The last thing that can be really impactful is for you as a manager to block time on your calendar for prep and follow-up, right? So making sure that you're coming into that one-on-one prepared. Like it might be like 5 or 10 minutes, and then moreover, if you have a bunch of one-on-ones in a given day, you might block a half hour to do prep for all of your one-on-ones, so you kind of know what you're going to be talking about, and you scan through those assets. But the important thing is, like, you don't want to just show up and be like, hey, what's on your mind? Or we want to show up with a game plan, and the mechanism by which you can do that is by having metrical resources to allow us to do that. Wonderful. So that's everything that I wanted to cover today. Again, if you guys are interested in grabbing a couple of these books that are some of my favorite sales management books and sales coaching books, we're going to go ahead and drop a link in the chat here for those, and a nice Coffees for Closers Yeti mug. But otherwise, thank you very much. I hope you really enjoyed the content here. And you know, if you're interested in raising your data-driven sales management game, again, I can't highly recommend Atrium enough. One of the neat things about it is it takes about 90 seconds to set up at atriumhq.com. So thanks so much for your time, and have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, Taylor.
Bye.